we'll go ahead and begin. So a couple of notes. So this is, as I said, the first session in a series of walkthroughs of how to use the augmented software. So we'll be going every 2 weeks, and we're going to start at the beginning, and we'll kind of go step by step. If you are following along live, we are not intending for you to be doing this with us at home. We're going to be moving pretty quickly through it, so it would be easy to lag behind and get a little lost. However, if you are watching this on the recording, then you'd be able to pause and work through with us, and that would be just fine. We are using beta software, so we are currently on build 330. 2 weeks from now, there's a very good chance we'll be on the next build, whatever is current at that time. So whatever is the most current each week is what we'll be using. And then last, just a note about the series. So last week, we did kind of a prologue conversation with Ann Valentino and Lowell Alcott and a few others about kind of the why of Augmented and why it was developed, the reasoning behind some of the features that will be included, things we're thinking about in the future. So that was kind of a little taster of this series. So if you haven't seen that, it is up on our YouTube channel, which is called Study Hall, ETC Study Hall on YouTube, which is also where this one will be. It takes a couple days for us to get them posted, but a few days from now, this one will be up there as well. And so the last thing I'll say about this series is I have a guess as to how many sessions it will be, but we'll see how these go. I want to make sure we're not rushing through or taking it overly slowly. So depending on how many questions you all have throughout, we'll get as far as we get today in the time we have. We have about 2 hours here, and that's where we'll stop, and we'll pick up at that point on the 2 weeks from now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my EOS software with everybody, and hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, so I am in, let's see here, build 330, which you can download from our open beta site. If you're not part of our open beta, you are welcome to join. There's instructions on the website as far as how to get there. etcconnect.com/augmented will have all the information about how to do that. Okay, so the file I'm going to work with today is one of 3 venues that Lowell has created a couple months ago. And I'm going to be using the fashion show file. So this file is also available on that Augmented webpage. And as we go today, I'm going to be building a few snapshots and things because I wanted to start with the file exactly as you might download it later on. So we're going to start there. Okay, so we've got our file loaded. So the first thing I want to talk about is how to run Augmented on a console or a computer. So there's 2 different methods to launch the software. So it is Augmented is actually a separate software application. It is tied in integrally with EOS, but it is a separate program. So the first way to run it is in a tab on a console, and not all consoles will be able to do this, and I want to talk about that. So the very first thing you need, and I'll just mention this, we've been beating this drum for probably 18 months now, is you do have to have a Windows 7 console or computer. If you're on an older console that has Windows XP under the hood, we are able to upgrade some of those consoles. If you're on, say, an EOS Classic, that console has served you well, it has lived a good life, but it will not be able to come with us on the journey to EOS 3.0 and Augmented. If you have a GeoApp 5 or an EOS TI, you're good to go. All of those consoles were shipped from day one with Windows 7. The ones in the middle are Element or Element 1, the original Element, and the Ion Classic consoles. So some of those, all of those consoles can be upgraded to Windows 7, and your local dealer or EPC tech support can help you determine that process. But basically, they do have to be shipped to the factory in Wisconsin, and they get a new motherboard, a new hard drive, a new I/O card, and then we ship those back to you, and then you will be able to install the software. That upgrade program will be ending at the end of March 2021. So if you haven't put that in your budget and your schedule for the next about 10 months, now would be the time to do that, because we'll be just due to parts and some other factors, we'll be unable to do those upgrades after that date. But we've had a lot of folks take advantage of that upgrade program so far. But if you haven't yet and you want to, please talk to your dealer or to ETC, and we can help you arrange that. Okay, so you have to have a Windows 7 console, and once you have that, the indicator that tells you if your console can run the software in a tab is if you have a DisplayPort connector on the back of your console. So that's just the indicator that you have a new enough generation of graphics and processing to allow that to happen. So some older GEOs have DVI ports. Those won't be able to run it in a tab, for example. So I'm going to go ahead and show how this works in a tab real quick here. So I'm going to open a tab. And the first one up here is Augmented. So the first time you open it, it's going to take a few seconds to initialize, and that's because it is a separate application that we're firing up. Once it's open, if you close that tab, it's still running in the background, so opening it again is much faster. There we go. And I'm just going to change a couple display settings here. We'll talk about these in depth a little bit later on today, but just so everyone can see a little better. So I'm going to change my quality down a bit for web broadcasting purposes. And I'm going to increase my ambient light just so you can see a little better. So this is what Augmented looks like in a tab. And I should also say today I'm running the software on my laptop. So this is just Nomad software. I'm actually in offline mode, which you can see in the bottom right corner. So if you are running this in a tab, you've got a few advantages and disadvantages. The advantages, it's right there. You know, if you have a Geo or a TI with a couple screens, you can just open it right there on a screen. When we're running it on board on a console, these quality options, you're only going to have low and medium. And I'll talk about the second method next, and as to how we can get these higher options. And the other thing is, this will take up one of your monitors. So if you're on an Ion, you have two monitors, it's going to take up some of that screen real estate. And then just to show closing a tab, I can close it, and I can reopen it, and it's going to just pop right back open. I can only have one instance of an Augmented tab per device. So like a live display, I can have multiple live tabs open at the same time. I can only have one Augmented tab open. So the second way to open or to run Augmented is through what we call a tether. And what this does, or how this works, is you need to network a second computer to your console or your first Nomad computer. And Mr. Gonsman had a whole series on multi-console setup and a networking session. So those are great resources for learning how to get that. Once you have a successful network connection, you will need to open the EOS software, and it's just the same Nomad software that we use everywhere else on the external computer on the laptop. And I'm going to attempt to show this here so you guys can see what it looks like. So if I exit into the shell, that did not work. Let's get back in there. It worked in practice, and of course, there we go. So you'll see that in the shell, there's now an Augmented Tether button here. So basically, your console or your main Nomad computer would be your primary in many scenarios, and then the laptop would run in augmented tether mode. For today, I'm going to go back into offline here. But what that tethered mode lets you do is, because we've now added another computer with another processor and another graphics card, we are able to leverage that processing, and on a tethered machine, we can use the high and ultra graphics settings. And another perk of doing it on a tether is that you get a kind of an extra free monitor. So if you're on an Ion Xe, you have 2 monitors, you can add a tethered laptop, for example, with augmented, and you now have a 3rd monitor dedicated to augmented all the time. You don't have to use up any of your existing screen real estate. We do right now require you to use the external computer's keyboard and laptop. Lowell, is it true that we're working to be able to try and use the console's mouse and laptop on the tether?
So that's something we'd like to look at in the future, but for first release, those are going to be separate if you're in a tether environment.
Great. So the tether for now will require separate keyboard and mouse on that machine. And then, so once you have clicked on so once you've set up your tether and you've gone in the augmented software, or on your laptop, you've done the tether, the last step to do is to go into setup, which I can show you here. I can't do it exactly because I'm not tethered right now. But in setup now, we have an augmented section here. And assuming you have a successful network connection, your tethered computer will show up here on the second line. And this button, so you'd select it, it'll show the IP address, and this button will change to say connect to server. And you would click that, and that would establish your tether. And then the word tethered will also appear in your network status area down here in the bottom right corner, where it says, right now it says user 1 offline. So it would also display the word tethered down there to indicate that you're on a tethered device. While we are in this screen, I just want to show a couple other settings here. So this is where we set our default measurement style. So we can switch between meters. So if I type in 1.5, once we get into setup and dimensioning things, 1.5 would mean 1.5 meters. I can switch to feet, and 1.5 would be 1.5 feet, so 1 foot 6 inches, right? Or I can switch to feet inches, which is what I'm going to leave it in for today. But here, 1.5 will mean 1 foot 5 inches. So it just depends on how you like to work. If you're used to the metric system, if you think of 1.5 feet as 1.5 feet, or if you think of 1.6 as 1 foot 6 inches, we give you whichever option you want to use. I can also enable or disable augmented per device. So if I disable this, augmented is going to close, and in that window, it's going to give me a message saying, hey, you're not allowed to open augmented on this device. You have to go into settings to fix it. So I will re-enable that here. That may be useful if you have a designer station or a stage manager station, or somebody who doesn't need augmented, just to prevent them from opening it and using up those system resources. We also allow you, so it has to reinitialize here. We also allow you to disable augmented per user. I'm not going to do it this time, but you can disable it on a user by user basis. So you may be switching between users on a single console, and if the user you're currently in doesn't have that enabled, you will not be able to run the augmented software. And then just a note about performance. So we are still working on displaying or producing minimum hardware requirements. I will say for today, I'm running this on a 4.5-year-old kind of middle of the road Dell laptop. so I'm not on a high-powered gaming machine or anything, and it's working pretty well. At least here, hopefully it is on the webcast as well for everybody. So it's certainly not something you're going to have to go out and buy a tippy top of the line powerhouse computer to run, but we will have those minimum system requirements at release. And then another note, you do not, on the tethered machine, you do not need a dongle, a Nomad dongle, to use this. So if you have an Ion, a console of any kind or a laptop with a dongle, your tethered machine just needs the software. It's the same version of software you're running on the main device, just like we always do when we're networking a multi-console system, and then you can run it. There's no hardware requirements or any money you have to pay other than already owning that secondary piece of hardware. Jason, so at this point, I'll pause for some questions.
So the biggest thing is we got a whole flurry of questions, and I was just wondering, you talked about what consoles can do what in the augmented world, but can you just consolidate a little bit and just give it all as a list right now, just so we reiterate what the capabilities are of each desk and different software versions or different hardware versions?
As far as tethered versus non-tethered?
In terms of when you need tethered, basically there's a whole flurry of questions about can't my console. I was just wondering, you talked about it all, but it was spread out over the course of the last 10 minutes. Can we just consolidate it and just give a recap?
Sure. Yeah, so to run EOS 3.0 at all, you have to have a Windows 7 console or laptop or computer. That's a hard stop just to install the software at all. And then to run Augmented on board a console, you have to have a DisplayPort connector on your console. So if you have to have at least one DisplayPort or mini DisplayPort. There are some Nomad pucks that have a mini DisplayPort, and that counts. And that it's not that you have to connect something to that port. That's just an indicator that the hardware is up to snuff to run the software internally. And then anyone can run, or any console can have a tether. So there might be folks who have the DisplayPort, they can run it internally, but they choose to tether a device, a laptop, so they have an extra monitor, so they have extra processing and can run the higher graphics quality, something like that. But to run it on board, you have to have a DisplayPort connector on your console, and anyone can run it as a tether on a separate machine. Do you think that covers it? If you guys still have questions about that, please ask. I want to make sure we're clear on all of this.
Yeah, and just to be aware, that question just gone away that I was going to answer. Basically, that this works between Mac and PC, so you can tether a Mac in with a console or a PC, and also this is not. To get the stuff that we're doing today, you do not need a dongle. So there's a bunch of questions from educational facilities. You can use this educational facilities as well. Not all the students need dongles.
Correct. Yeah, just to talk about that for a second. So as offline software, which is free to download, which it always has been and will continue to be, this is included. So right now, I don't have a dongle for everything we're doing today. I'm running it in offline mode. I can create my world here. I can build my model. I can pre-write some cues if I want to. I can save that show file, bring it to a console, and open it up just like I've always been able to. So for students who are working on projects, or maybe taking a show file home to make some tweaks on, it works exactly as it always has. Now there's just this augmented component to it. And then the tethered machine also does not require a dongle.
Excellent. So I think that's all the questions that are related to the section.
Okay. Great. Well, I'm going to move on into the software a little bit. And it looks like my quality changed when I came out and went back in. So I'm going to drop that back to medium and change my light, and I promise I'll go over these things in just a moment here. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna do is come up to my camera and click on bookmark 3, so we can move that, and that's the next thing we'll cover is our views. But just so we can all kind of see a little better here. And I'm going to do a split screen here so we can kind of see a couple of things that are going on. So I'm going to move my live table down here and turn that off. And I'm going to open up ML controls over here because I'm on a laptop and you guys can see everything I'm doing. And then I'm just going to resize. So if you are following along on the video after the fact, you're welcome to set it up this way as well. This is more just so everybody can see what's happening. All right, and I'm going to record that as snapshot 1, so we have it for later. Okay, so, and I want to show the live display, the live table display here, along with the augmented window, just so you can see how they interact with each other. So if I turn on 23 through 25, you can see in my table display here, they've turned on and they're actually not patched, which doesn't matter for this exercise. There's no address assigned to those fixtures, which there doesn't need to be. But just like I've always been able to do, I can see they're at full, they're red because it's manual values. If I pan and tilt them, those values will become red, and I'll see them moving on the display as well. So it seamlessly works with your live display. We just now have a visual representation of that same data. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little more here. I'm going to zoom those out. And make them like a cyan color. I'm going to put a gobo in here and sharpen it. And I used this analogy last session too. So previous to having the visualizer, looking at your live display or a blind display was sort of like reading the Matrix. For those of you old enough to know those movies, it's a bunch of numbers, and you can become really good at a glance understanding what's going on and what's important and what you can ignore. But now we have a visual representation of that data. I know what gobo it is as a glance. I don't have to come over here and see, oh, that's this breakup. I can see that it's sharp. I don't have to know what my edge values are, for example. Okay, so I'm going to sneak all of that out. And I'm going to write a couple cues here to show how this works in blind. So I'm going to turn on group 13 to full. These are just some downline pars. Actually, I forgot to do one thing. So we are going to jump into patch. And a new thing, I noticed the fixtures didn't look quite right. So we've added the new indicator in patch here, which is an asterisk in front of the fixture type. And what that means is there is a new fixture profile. The fixture profile in the software is newer than the fixture profile in my show file. So whenever this show file was saved last, since then, there's been an update to the fixture profile. So I'm going to click on fixtures, my soft key here, and you'll see here these 3 fixtures all have asterisks. So I can, so they all have an update available. So I'm going to click the update all button and say OK. If you're in the middle of a show, Nick covered this last week. If you're in the middle of a run, this could affect what your show looks like. So be cautious about doing that. This probably, if your show is playing back fine, there's not really a need to do this. But if you're starting your tech process, like we are right now, you can come in and check and see if there's any fixture updates, and then you'll be fine moving forward. So I'm going to come back out, just pull my snapshot back here. Okay. So what changed there, just in case you guys are curious what I saw, the color source pars, which are the fixtures that are on right now, they're much more detailed now. The model was much more generic in the make sure kind of a generic par looking thing, and now they're actually shaped like color source pars. So the physical model changed. Okay, so back to our queue here. So group 13 is at full, and I'm going to put that in Roscoe 68. And then group 12 at full, and I'm going to put those in Roscoe 26. So we have some red and some blue. And again, you can see this in my live display. You can see that those channels are in R26, but at a glance at my screen, I can see that they're red. So I'm going to record this as Q1. Okay, and for the next Q, I want to add an effect. So I'm going to say group 11, which is all of the pars, and I want to say offset random, effect 915, which is one of our stock ramp effects, and I'm going to run that. And then to make it a little more obvious, especially here on the webcast, I'm going to change my rate and size each to 400. So we should be able to see some lights running that ramp effect. All right, so I'm going to record that as Q2. And then finally, I'm going to take group 11. I'm going to stop the effect, so effect enter, and I'm going to home those fixtures as well. And here we go. So that will home everything except the intensity, so the color is back to its home value. And we're going to record that as Q3. Okay, so far we've been doing everything in live, and so all of these things would have also been happening on our actual stage, not just here on our screen. So if we go into blind, so we're in blind Q3 here. If I say last, I'm going to be able to go and at a glance in blind see that that effect is running on this queue. So just like I've always been able to do on my actual stage, nothing has changed. Those lights are on in white. I can hit last again. Now I'm looking at Q1 in blind. And again, this data is just reflecting what the live display has always shown us, but in a visual format. So I'm going to hit next. So I'm looking at Q2 here. And I'm going to make a change. So I'm going to say group 11, I'm going to change their color to Lee 200. Okay. And now if I go back into live, if I back up a queue, so before I do that, I'm here in live. Nothing has actually changed this whole time because we've been working in blind. But now if I back up a queue, we can see that in live and on our stage, that change has taken effect. Because as always in blind, changes take effect immediately. As soon as I hit enter, I don't have to hit update or anything in blind. Any questions coming in on this section, Jason?
Hey, Rob, it's Lowell. I would just maybe say to everybody your workflow. So we're covering the tools right now. I know a lot of you were asking questions about basic setup. We just wanted to give an overview of everything before we jump into that full detail.
Yeah, this is just kind of showing a little bit of what we're going to work towards. Yeah, so we'll go into navigation next, and then we'll start building our file.
So yeah, just hang in there with us for a few things. We want to talk about the concepts before we get to the specifics.
One more thing, this is David Fox. I just wanted to let you know, because I've had a number of people ask this question as well. These sessions are being recorded, and they will be made available on our YouTube channel. So when you're actually ready to sit down and work on a project, you can come back in and follow along again.
And just to reiterate that the show file that we're using is public. You can download that off the website. I think there was a link to that on the sign up. Is that correct, David?
I'll take a look into that right now, and I'll see if I can post it into the Q&A.
Okay. So one of the questions that came up as you're playing with this stuff, how accurate is the beam focus? I know that's a deep question, but can you just do a quick overview of the accuracy of the beam and focus that you're playing with?
Sure. I'm going to go to Q out here just to get that off the stage. So I've got a fixture here. And is the question, can you tell Jason about like pan tilt accuracy or like gobo and edge kind of thing? I mean, I can talk about
unclear, but you can talk about both pretty quick.
Yeah. So I've got one fixture here, and I'm going to tilt it up onto our person.
Clarification, he's talking about edge, but it'd be good to talk about both.
Yeah, so this is, and we talked about this last week quite a bit, or 2 weeks ago, the last session. So this software is not meant to be a photorealistic visualizer. There's a lot of good ones out there. We use Capture for our training. There's plenty of others as well. And we're not trying to duplicate their efforts or be a photorealistic visualizer. We are, this is a lightboard software, first of all. So that is its primary function. We're never going to slow down the output of your console so that the augmented graphics look better. In fact, we're going to purposefully do the opposite. So we want to make sure that the output of your show is always correct. What's on your actual stage, if you're running a ton of effects, chases, with a whole host of universes of moving lights or pixel tape or whatever you're doing, that is the priority since we're a lightboard, since this is console software. With the resources we have, once that's taken care of, we can then use some resources for this screen to make it look as accurate as we can. So I will say, let me get to my edge here. I would almost guarantee that the edge, is not going to be exactly what it is in real life. I can tell this is sharper right here. It started out a little more blurry. So those sort of things for pre-programming, this will get it close. It's around 40 right now. It was at 0, so 40 is closer to sharp for sure. But more than likely, once I'm in the venue, I'm going to have to tweak that edge when I'm looking at my stage. As far as position, pan tilt, we'll get into this in future sessions, but the short answer is the more accurate that your model is, the more accurate the pan tilt data will be. It can be incredibly accurate if we have the right data, accurate data from your space. It's all math at that point, and we can only do the math with the numbers that we have.
Jack is asking, should the beam angle be the field angle or the actual beam angle?
Oh, I don't know that one. Lowell?
It's actual beam angle right now. We're looking at some ways we can depict both and be a little bit more realistic in our rendering in the future. But yeah, it's just the angle coming out of the fixture right now.
What is the behavior of parked channels in Augmented?
Yeah, sorry. Go, Rob.
Go ahead, Lowell.
I was just going to say, we're not doing much with parked right now. Again, just trying to represent what fixtures are doing from a control side. Definitely something we want to expand upon in the future.
I don't know a shortcut for park. I was going to play with it.
For students learning to create creative images, would Capture be better for them, i.e. learning aesthetics?
I think that's a very subjective question. Capture can certainly do more photorealistic images than we can here. If you're using it for a portfolio, or you're trying to get a job based on that work, I would assume that folks would want to have the most accurate and the prettiest looking things that they could have. Having said that, there is a cost associated with most visualizers, and as a student, I can download this software and work with it and create images that I can put in my portfolio and present for free. So again, it's sort of a sliding scale of what is most important to you.
Can we record camera view any cue and then use smoothly time when we push go?
Oh, great question. So all of these things, and we'll do a little more navigation here as well, but all of the view components, and we're going to get into what all of those are stored in, or can be stored in, snapshots. So for example, I can just show you right now because we have a snapshot. Like if I move this view, and I'll show you, we're going to talk about how to do all these controls. So if I come over here and then reload my snapshot, it's going to go back to where we were a moment ago. So as far as doing it with a queue, we've had the ability for forever, I think, to execute a snapshot from a queue. So that would be the easy way to do that. So your queue would execute a snapshot, which would change your camera angle. As far as smoothly moving it, I don't believe there's currently a way to watch a camera pan around unless you're doing it manually, unless I'm mistaken, Lowell, because a snapshot is always just an instant recall of your view.
No, you're correct. So we've had some conversations about things like camera pathing and doing some interesting things like that. Not in first release, but something that we're interested about in the future.
Great. There are ways, and we'll get to this probably in 2 or 3 sessions from now, to have objects move in time, scenic objects, but we'll get to that in later sessions.
All right. What fixtures are we able to use in Augmented?
Oh, great question. Here, I'm going to go back into Patch, back to that screen where I updated the fixture profile. So here in Patch, in the fixture screen, there we go. You can see there's a little 3D icon next to these fixtures. So those fixtures do have a specific model for Augmented. Here, let me show this in Patch, actually. So if I go to Patch a new fixture, and I go to Type, and I search for something like linear. So these fixtures, these are ECC fixtures, all have that 3D logo. So those fixtures have specific physical dimensions that are hopefully correct, that will be in the software. Not every fixture in the library is going to have that. So if I go to Martin, and I'm just, so these fixtures do not have the logo. So what we do for those instances is we'll give you a generic, we'll put something in the model, but it may not look like the real fixture. I know for a while, if we didn't have it, the default was to put a source 4. I think that has changed a little bit. Maybe we'll talk about what the defaults are for fixtures we don't have a dimensions for.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a number of basic shapes, different fixture sizes and shapes. We try to get whatever's closest from the knowledge that we have about the fixture. This is very similar to how we've been handling color for a while. So with color, it will control anything with color, but it's whether or not we have a really good calibration on that color or not. And this will be an ongoing thing for the entire life of all of these products. We'll continue to add more and more fixtures as we get that data. It just comes down to, do we have all the data we need? And we found out even for the ETC fixtures and high-end fixtures, we didn't have as much data as we really would have liked. So we went out and got some of that. So we've been working with a lot of our fixture partners to get that data as we go. The one thing I will just say that we do not support are moving mirror fixtures. So we do have this pretty much focused around moving head fixtures, so pan and tilt in actual physicality. So we would like to add some things for moving mirror fixtures in the future, but it's a very different set of math that we'll be tackling at a later point.
Lowell, is it true that if I had a moving light that we didn't have the data for, but I had the gobos in it are in the library, that the gobos would show up correctly?
Yeah,
even if the fixture
absolutely.
itself looks,
so it just comes down to what we know about the fixture, and if we have more information, we'll put it in there. And if we don't know more about that fixture, there are also some things you can do to make it a little bit more accurate inside of the fixture library editor that we'll probably talk about at a later point.
Just building off of that, just to confirm, are the photometrics correct even if the model itself is not available?
It's all kind of interrelated. So it's, if we have information, we use it.
Okay. And questions about in the future, will we be able to import or build our own fixtures for Augmented?
You can do some modification of fixtures right now, but we don't have like a full way to do the full kinematic import yet. But we're hoping to have some wizards for that in the future.
Okay. Do the Augmented fixture libraries read or relate to Vectorworks or Vision fixture modes at all?
If you've imported from Vectorworks, we will bring all the information from the modes and things like that, but not for photometrics or anything.
Okay. Do pixel maps run?
Yes,
they do. And this model has a basic pixel map in it, which we will get to at a later session.
Excellent. One question that popped up that got answered text-wise, but not verbally. If you guys want to take a look at the screen right now, notice that we have not patched addresses for this to run. So the question was, do you have to patch your fixtures in order for Augmented to work? And in this case, as of right now, there is no addresses on any of the fixtures that Rob's playing with.
Yep, correct. So here's the pars we were using earlier. And once we get to patching, which we'll probably be doing at the next session, we'll look at all the different options as to if you want things only in Augmented or not in Augmented versus patch. So they're definitely tied together, but it is not necessary.
Excellent. I think that's all the questions relatable for this section.
Okay. Great. Well, let's keep moving. So I'm going to go back to my first snapshot here. And for this part, I'm actually just going to go full screen. I don't need to see any of the other, let's be in live here. I don't need to see any of the other things for a few moments. So I'm going to record this as snapshot 2. And we'll probably just bounce between those two throughout the day. So a couple of just ways to move around the model. So there are some keyboard navigation. So right now I'm using my keyboard. I'm using my left key. Now I'm using my right key. So think of this as a camera in space, and you can move that camera around. So I'll come back to center. I can go up. I can go down. So it's just going in a straight line in whichever direction I push. And then the last one I can do is if I hold shift, I can dolly in or out. So I'm physically moving forward or backwards. If you're on a console, this all works exactly the same way. So your page up, down, left, right buttons, and the shift key will do all of these exact functions. Or you can use an external keyboard. Works the same both ways. We do have some additional controls that we can do with the mouse. So now I'm holding my mouse. Having a mouse with a wheel is greatly helpful. So I'm going to click and hold my mouse wheel right now. And this is going to do the same thing as those arrow keys. So up, down, left, right. So I'm just sliding the camera in those directions. And then if I roll the mouse wheel, it's going to do that dolly back and forth. So that is the same as holding shift and pressing up or down. And then some controls I can only do with the mouse. if I click and hold the right mouse button, I can look around. So I'm going to put the camera right here. And now from this fixed point in space, I can move my head wherever I want to look. Hopefully that's not too jumpy on the webinar for everybody. And then finally, I have the option if I hold down the Alt key, and Lowell, maybe you can chime in with the Mac equivalent for this. If I hold down Alt on PC and with a console, this will have to be on the external keyboard, and right click, then I'm going to orbit around that point that I've clicked on. So again, this is Alt holding the right mouse button and dragging the mouse around.
It's a command on Mac. And you can change those defaults about whether you want to always be in pan or orbit or fly.
Yep, yeah, we'll get to that in just a sec. And then if you're wondering, the left mouse button will select fixtures, and we will look at that later on. But that's what left clicking does. Okay, so we're going to go back to the camera menu, which we peeked in for a moment earlier. I want to explain this a little more in depth now. So our camera menu here, we have some default camera view, we call them bookmarks. So if I click on home, it's going to look here from the front. Bookmark 1 is from the front at a little bit steeper angle. 2 is straight down. 3 is from this side. 4 is from the opposite side. And 5 is from the back. So if let's say I don't like this one, maybe it's not that useful to me, I can maybe make some changes in the orbit. Maybe I like that view. I can come in here and click and hold, left click and hold on the bookmark to update it. And so now if I jump between bookmarks, I'm going to go back to 5. And it's going to retain that. If I want to reset those, I can just click this Restore View Defaults. And now when I click 5, it's going to be back where it was. So those defaults are built in, and they're based on our XYZ, which we talk about next. So keep this in mind as you're building your venue. It's probably most helpful to have home be looking at the front instead of looking at it from the side or the back or something. So make sure when we build the venue, we'll look at making sure we orient our stage in the correct plane so that these defaults are useful for us. I've got some more display stuff here, but any questions at this moment, Jason?
A couple questions. Is there a way to move straight forward on an XY axis while the camera is looking on an angle?
While the camera is looking at an angle. So if I'm at an angle, so meaning like a long.
I think that's what I mean.
Oh, I see. On the XY. No, I don't believe so. Lowell, is there something I'm missing? This is I relate this to like the local versus global XYZ.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
For camera movement, there is not. So there is for object movement, which we'll get to, but for camera there is not.
Okay. Mirat, can you confirm your question? I'm a little confused. It says, "Can we use import camera?" Do you know what that question is asking? Okay. Ben asks, don't the arrow keys do the XY axis movement of the camera?
Ask that again, please.
Don't the arrow keys do the XY axis movement of the camera?
They move the camera in XY, but not on the XY of the space.
Yes, they move it based off of where you're currently pointed.
Right.
For that.
So if I'm pointed here and I do right, I'm going to move this way. If I'm pointed here and I press my right arrow key, it's going to slide that way.
Okay.
From its current position.
Excellent. So I think that's all of the questions that are related to navigation right now. Again, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, Murat. If you can clarify your question, I'm more than happy to answer it.
Well, I'll keep going, and we can clarify that in a moment if we need to. So some other camera tools, actually, to show these, I'm going to come in and get right on our figure here. Raise up a little. So the next line of tools is our look shortcuts. So I can look from the front, and again, this orienting your model correctly from the get-go will help these function as well as they can. So if I click that one, it's going to look from the back. So this is the camera's not moving position in space. It just flipped 180 essentially. So I can look from the left to the right. I can look up at my rig, or I can look down at the floor. So, and then from there, I can just keep moving. But those are just some shortcuts to quickly flip your view to whichever direction you need. Maybe from here, I want to look at the front, and then I can raise down. Okay, so then the last row here, we have some other view options. So I'm going to click on a fixture and say zoom to selection. So that is a quick way to just bring our camera to a certain object. And then again, from here, I can move wherever I need to do. Pick this one over here, do it again. So just a quick way to do that. And clear my command line. For this next one, I'm going to go back to our snapshot 1 here. So for here, I'm going to use this fixture that we've turned on already, and I'm going to pan it over here. And now what I'm going to do is enable fixture point of view. So I'm going to click on that. And now with that fixture, so this is based on your selection. So now the camera is going to act as if it is inside the gate of that fixture. And I can as I tilt, the camera's going to tilt. As I pan, the camera's going to pan with me. And then as soon as I turn that off, it's just going to go back to where we were. So this might be useful if you can't quite see what you're pointing at. Again, if your model is accurate to your real space, you might be able to hit the side of a wall or behind a piece of scenery or something that you can't quite see from your actual seat at the tech table or in the booth. Okay, let's do a clear sneak enter. And I'm going to go back to full screen for this one. And I'm going to go to bookmark 2. So the next option is perspective view versus orthographic view. So in perspective view, things that are farther away will look smaller. As I move, that center piece of truss is kind of floating from one side to the other. If I go to my camera view here and click on so right now we're in perspective, I can click on that and switch to orthographic. And now it's going to look more like a 2D CAD drawing, like a plan drawing. So if I go to my number 3 bookmark from the side here, and then angle, rotate down, I've got kind of a section view here. So this is really useful when you're building your venue, when you're placing lights on truss, when you're butting walls up against scenery or against floors, things like that, because you know that the perspective won't be throwing you off. When I first started playing with this, I was building things in perspective view, and then I changed my camera angle, and I was like, oh, that wall isn't actually connected to that other wall. So the orthographic view is a really good tool to build your venue. I prefer to use perspective when I'm operating, it will certainly work in orthographic, you know, all the time. But personally, I think most of us feel that it looks a lot more natural in perspective view. But they both, you know, disadvantages and times to use each of those tools. And I'm going to hit my home button here, my home bookmark. And then the last tool here is what Lowell mentioned a few minutes ago. So right now it's set to fly. So that is our right click and hold functionality. So right now we're just moving the camera view, or the camera in space. And if I hold Alt, I get that orbit function while I'm right clicking and holding. I can switch those defaults, so I can have it default to orbit. So now anytime I right click, it's going to orbit. And then if I need to just look around, I can hold Alt, which I'm doing now, and use that right mouse button. So again, personal preference, whichever one you use most, you can default to, and then you can hold down Alt when you want to use the other. I'm going to put that back to fly for now. And then as a reminder, the snapshots are gonna remember all of these settings. So once you get something you like, you can record a snapshot, and you can choose to record a snapshot that is only augmented. Let's look at that real fast. Let's say record snapshot 3. So I can uncheck basically everything here, and it will only be storing the camera data and the augmented data in that snapshot. So if you don't want it to affect your standard screen layouts, that would be how you do that. Any other display navigation questions, Jason?
Not at this time.
Great. So the last part that we've got here is on display is to talk about our display quality. So this has to do with how well the graphics are rendering, and depending on your machine, if you're on a TI, if you're on an Element, if you're on a 4.5-year-old Dell laptop like I am, or a gaming laptop. So down here in the corner is this little dot, and if I hover over it, it's going to tell me what that color means. So right now we're running at 60 frames per second, so that's pretty good. It's considered very high. So I have a green dot. If your settings are such that you're running at a lower speed, that dot will change color in real time to indicate. So we looked at these briefly at the top. Let's go ahead and go into those a little bit more here. So I can get to the display settings in two ways. I can click Options and then on Quality to come here, or I can actually just click on that dot and it will also bring me there. So our quality settings, we have low as an option here. I found in low, the beams of light, the difference of how the beams of light look between low and medium is pretty drastic. So I think they look significantly more realistic on medium. Here, let me turn one on. We can look at that. Here, we'll go to Q1. And we'll turn that guy on. So here, since we're in low, you can see we can't even really see the beam on the floor, but this is going to use the least amount of system resources. So depending on your situation, you may need to use this. Once we go to medium, that makes the beams look much more realistic. We can also, if you are on a tethered machine or a Nomad like I am, you will also have high and ultra options. And I'm not sure how good these will come through on the webcast, but you can play with those on your machine. This will also affect Gobo resolution, as well as the objects in the model themselves, like objects with a lot of detail and curves and corners are going to look more realistic the higher up your quality goes. So I'm going to set that back to medium. And then we have some lighting selections here. So I can do optimized, and the picture of the gobo on the table here kind of tells the story pretty well. So this is going to have lights just continue through objects until it hits the ground plane. I can switch to, so that uses the least amount of system resources. I can switch to approximated, and what that does is the beam of light will go until it hits an object, and then it will stop. It will not continue. So you can see there's no light on the floor here. Or I can go to realistic, and that's going to hit objects and also allow it to continue to hit other surfaces along the way. So for these sessions, I'm going to leave it on medium and optimized, just because we're broadcasting and I don't want it to be too laggy with everything. We also have the ability to set a refresh rate. So this is a max, so I could turn this down to 50 if I wanted to, and that's going to save a little bit on processing. So I'm going to leave it at 60 for now. And again, we've gotten the question a lot about hardware recommendations. We are still working on those as far as officially published ones. If you're on the beta group and you have specific issues with performance, it'll help us if you tell us what processor, what graphics card, what operating system you are running on, so that we can look into those and see what works and what might be required for these. Any questions about graphics?
Can you just re-hit the colored dot and what that means?
Yeah. So hopefully you can see that there. So you can see right now we're at 40 frames per second. More than likely it's because I turned on some fixtures. So let's drop that down a little bit. So the dot refers to, it's just a quick color-coded indicator of what your refresh rate is currently able to do graphically. So the lower that number, the more kind of steppy and chunky that your graphics are going to look. And this in the augmented window.
Hey, Rob, just to clarify that just a little bit more, that is also a health of what your system is. So if you're running this on a really awesome gaming computer, you're going to see blues and greens more often. If you're running this on a 4-year-old Dell, like Rob keeps mentioning, you're going to probably be in yellows a little bit more. And based off of your settings, it's just kind of a status of what's going on.
And the more I have going on in my model, the more taxing that's going to be. So if I turn on every moving light in here, it would more than likely drop that down a bit more.
And changing the refresh rate is only an upper limit, right? It can only go as high as it is running, correct?
That's correct. Lowell, can I set it above 60?
Yeah, you can set it to whatever you want. It's basically just putting a cap on it. So how much do you want to allow it to take from your processing?
That's it for display or resolution across display interests right now.
Okay, great. Okay, so why don't we look at, I want to look at, I'm just going to mention a little bit of file management here. I didn't have another great place to put it, and then we'll talk about the environment itself. Kind of how we've looked at what we're navigating around. We'll talk about the details of what we're navigating through here. So I'm going to go to my file browser here. And the thing I just wanted to show here, I'm not going to do it today, but I just wanted to point this out at some point. If I go to File New, and I'm going to say Continue without saving. So when I go to create a new show file, there's a new checkbox here that says Preserve Augmented Model. And what that will do, if it is unchecked, and I click OK, I'm not going to do it today. You're welcome to, if you're following along. So what that will do is wipe out your show file like it always has. but it's also going to wipe out your model. So we default in the augmented world here to having a floor and nothing else. You do have to have a floor for lights to hit something. So that will wipe out everything in your model. If you check the box and say, okay, it will wipe out all your show data, your patch, your cues, your palettes, everything, but it will keep your model intact. So that might be a useful tool if you are starting a new show, but you want to keep your venue in there. That way you don't have to re-import your venue every time. If you're doing a play with scenery, you might leave the box checked, say, okay, and then you could go in and remove the show specific scenery, but keep the walls and floor of your venue in there. So I just wanted to mention that here. I'm going to say cancel for today. Okay, so let's take a look at, I'm going to click our home button here, and I'm going to go to queue out. So I want to talk about 3D environments a little bit here. So every environment has an origin point. So if you're familiar with CAD software, you'll know what that is, and that is basically the X, Y, and Z planes all have to have a 0 point somewhere. So for this model, to see it, I'm going to click our edit and open our editor here. And I'm going to change my view a little bit. We'll talk about the editor in much more depth in a future session, but I'm going to come up here. And we can see that blue line, the green line, and there should be a red line, which I am not seeing. Oh, there it is, off to the right back here. So these are our axes, and where those three lines intersect is the origin point of the model. So for this specific model, it is right at the center. So the red line is our X axis, and I've rotated the camera so we can see it, but that is basically moving left, right through our model. The green line is our Y axis, so it's moving from front to back through our model. And then the blue line is our Z axis, so that's moving up and down in space. So for when you're creating a space, it's good to purposefully choose your origin point because everything is going to be measured off of that. So on each axis, I can do plus or minus a number of feet. So if I click on this fixture, it's going to tell me that it is -10 feet off the X axis. So it's on 10 feet this side. Its mate over here is going to be +10 feet, which you can see there. It is 6'8" positive from the Y origin, and then it is 19'6" high on the Z axis. So in a traditional proscenium theater setting, to me it makes sense to have the X axis be on your center line, because then you can talk about things in terms of left and right from center. So it'd be positive or negative feet from center or meters from center. Your Y axis could be your plaster line. So anything that's positive would be upstage of your plaster line. Anything that's negative would be downstage of your plaster line. And then the Z height, the Z origin would be the deck, like the height of the floor. So you would know, okay, this light is on the first electric, so it's 2.5 feet upstage. That'd be 2.5 positive Y. It is 5 feet stage left, so that's 5 feet positive X, and it's 22 feet in the air, so a positive 22 Z. So these numbers will become very important as we're moving objects around in our model. And once we get into patching, we'll show that we have the ability to punch these numbers in or import it from, say, Vectorworks if we already have that data, or we can manually move them around in the model, and those will update throughout the software. So the other point, or the other thing we need to know, so we need to know the XYZ position of an object here in our model. Rotate up here. But we also need to know an object's rotation. So the XYZ is this point right here where the three axes come together, which is at the top of that fixture. But the rotation is also important to know. And we'll explore this in a future video. But for the moment, I will just show the rotation. So I can rotate this on any of the three axes. So I can rotate it on the X. So these circle buttons are 90-degree kind of shortcuts, just quick moves. So I can spin it 90 at a time on the X-axis, and X is always going to be red. I can spin it 90 degrees on the Y-axis. And I don't have to do 90, I can do other increments too, but these buttons are the 90 shortcuts. Or I can spin it on the Z-axis, and that's basically going to spin the light on the truss, like that. So just to show this, if I move something not in 90-degree chunks, maybe this light, if I have an ellipsoidal, it's pointed at a 45-degree angle. Moving light's kind of a funny example. Let's look at this guy. So I can tip that ellipsoidal like that, and now so the position hasn't changed. It's still hung. So the position is kind of like where the C-clamp hits the pipe. That's the position. And the rotation is what the yoke and the tilt are doing on that fixture. So these concepts, right now I just want to talk about it in terms of general concepts. We'll get into how to do this fixture specifically in the future. But so that when you hear these terms, you'll know what we're talking about. So position, rotation, we've covered, and those 6 points of data, so we have XYZ position and XYZ rotation. All of that data together we call pose information. So if you hear us talk about pose, that refers to position and rotation. Any questions about that? Kind of 3D environments in general. Yeah.
Yeah. So are the measurements of the fixtures taken from the rigging point of the fixture or the actual fixture itself?
So every fixture, every object actually has a base point. So on a source 4, for example, the base point is where the C-clamp would meet the pipe. So it's actually above, and I believe in the model we don't show the C-clamp, we just show the yoke. Yeah, so the base point, oh, am I lying, Lowell? Did this change?
It is changing, but not in this build. You'll see this a little bit clearer in the next build that will be coming out. We'll actually be showing that point a little bit more well-defined.
So it should be more like up here.
There are quite a few conversations right now going on about indicating where that green dot, which indicates where the plugs and the screen type things are, and where the relationship point of the fixture is. This is very much in flux right now as we're getting some great opinions and some help from people. But you'll see that evolving and changing. So I would say right now you will have some better tools than we are able to show you in this video by the time you're fully released. So keep an eye on that. It's something that we are actively changing based off community involvement.
And now Anne and Matt Halberstadt and Lowell can all yell at me because I explicitly told them this morning that we would not cover that in today's video. So
that's fine. Don't worry about it.
Here we are.
Just know it's changing.
A question that's popped up a number of times, and you did explain this, Rob, but I just want to kind of reiterate the points.
Sure.
The origins is fixed, so you can't move the origin points around. But the origin is whatever you want it to be. So people are asking, like, is the origin the deck, is the origin the house, that sort of stuff. It's what makes sense to you. So build your model and do some forethought about how this is going to be the easiest to put together. You know, sometimes people like to have origin points to be a fixed point in the building so they can take all their measurements off of the back corner of the stage. Some people like to do it off the center line, like we had talked about, where the origin is center and the plaster line. So that's one of the things you have to think about when you're starting to build your models is where do I want all of my measurements to come off of? Doesn't matter. The console doesn't care where that origin is. It's how you're building the model.
Yeah, and we do not have the ability to move the origin. So basically, when you're building your venue, when you're dropping your venue into the model, you can move the venue to the origin. We do have the ability to make the floor any size we want, but the origin will always be, I believe, Lowell, correct me if I'm wrong, in the center of that floor plane.
Well, you can, once you have the floor, and you can place it wherever you want. Okay. The origin conversation. I answered this directly to a few people, but let me just talk about it. You know, you can, when you add something in, we have a fixed origin, and you can move your pieces around, just like Rob said. The one thing I will just say is there have been lots of requests for, hey, I want sub origins, and I want to be able to set an origin for a pipe and things like that. We'll say a little bit right now that we hear you. We want to definitely add some of that as we continue to go, but we needed to pick a place to start. All right, so some other questions.
Yes,
if you want to run with those.
Yeah. So we got a number of questions now related to other topics. I think this would be probably a good time to kind of fill them in a little bit. Sure. A couple more questions about system requirements and things like that. Can this run by itself on a Mac? So if you have a Mac running in primary mode with Nomad, can we do that?
I'll let Lowell officially answer that one.
Maybe. If you can see the little tiny screen up there, Lowell is showing us that he has running Augmented on his Macintosh right now.
Okay.
In primary mode, I assume. For a Windows PC, does Windows need to be 64-bit, or can Windows 7 32-bit run this?
We all went quiet. I believe.
Is there a Windows 7 32-bit?
I believe there was.
I'm trying to find an answer to that question.
I'm going to have to phone a friend on that one.
Not seeing anything in the forums. Yeah, I haven't been able to find an answer for that one either.
Hang on, I will phone a friend.
In terms of Macintosh, Mojave or Catalina, or does it matter? Lowell, are you aware of that?
Yes, it does matter. We are saying Mojave and Catalina only. And I know that was a little bit of a change that we made in 3.0 and is a little bit hard for some people to digest. Unfortunately, it's the same thing that we're doing with saying Windows 7 is the minimum. We need some of the things that have been added in Mojave, Catalina, Windows 7, 10, and et cetera to run this. A lot of the graphics work is pretty advanced, and the older operating systems just didn't have the stuff it needed. So it's the first time we've put some hard limits on that, but they are indeed there.
All right. Can you export a Vectorworks plan and create the venue this way?
Yes, you certainly can. There is a plugin for Vectorworks, which I believe was recently added to the beta forums for Mac and PC. So that plugin will export the fixture data in a way that Augmented can understand and import really well. So it's basically two steps, so one is your scenery, your scenic elements. If your venue's in Vectorworks, you can export that, and then the fixtures are a separate export, and the plugin is for the fixtures specifically. We will in a later session go through the mechanics of that, but the short answer is yes. We do, one note on that, we do have to, so currently we can't import Vectorworks files natively. We do an export from Vectorworks into, we've had a lot of success using the Collada format, and then we can import that Collada file into Augmented.
Rob, this is David Fox. If memory serves, there's a plan for a future session where we're going to talk more about import-export from different file programs, correct?
Uh,
I know we've kicked that around. I don't know if it's on the, or, I mean, I don't think it's on the schedule, but yes, we definitely want to
Yes,
cover
we
that
want
for
to.
folks.
Yeah, so I'll just talk a little bit about the theory there. So really what it came down to is we knew that everybody out there had some form of file or some form of knowledge in another program, or is brand new to 3D, and that's perfectly fine too. So what we didn't want to do was put all of the different drawing tools required into Augmented, because there are so many other wonderful softwares out there that do that so well and so targetedly. So what we instead did is we researched lots and lots of different file types that we could bring in. As mentioned, Collada is the one that we have found has been awesome. It's a DAE file. It is just a third-party designed not third-party, what's the term I'm looking for? Open source designed 3D format that most software support. It's been really, really helpful. But then we do have like native SketchUp import and a whole bunch of other ones. There's a list of, I think we're at something like 40 different file types there that we can bring in and be helpful. Jeff asked a question about, just to be clear, this model is built with the origin below the floor. This model actually has the model of that origin itself. Rob, if you can zoom out just a little bit. I think I moved that around a little bit based off what I was doing for origin. Some of the stock venues we have in there do have their origin on top of the object, so that the ground plan, the plane that people are standing on, is at that 0Z point. So yes, there's parts of that are below the origin. So Rob, if you come down, just pan yourself down a little bit there, and then look back up at the model. So you can see like there are parts that are below that grid, and that's just so that you have a 0, point that is on the floor.
Hey, Lowell, speaking of, this is a question that had come in about an hour ago that Weston had asked, and you mentioned stock files, but one of the questions that came in, as I said, Weston asked, I'm planning to use this for remote delivery classes in the fall. Does ETC have any plans to facilitate any kind of a library of theater plans that teachers could use, so that the individual teachers don't have to build every different theater that they have on their space?
So we had a grandiose plan of a cloud-based file storage thing that people could always upload, and legally that became a little weird. So we've made there are 6 venues that are in there by default. It's a large black box, a small black box, around and in the round circle and in the round square, a proscenium, a thrust, and a traverse. That's 7 I can count. So making those available as starting points. We have some plans for future releases of this to do some wizard type things, to answer 6, 7 questions about your venue, and we'll give you a starting point stuff. Definitely somewhere we want to continue to expand upon. By the way, I just got an answer to my phone a friend. The Windows, or EOS 3.0 is Windows 7 64-bit only.
Excellent. Question from Angelina earlier. Is there a published list of all the camera navigation shortcuts and which buttons to push when while holding other keys?
Yeah, there's a starter to that. If you go into the beta forums and go to that general page and your welcome stuff, there's a couple of manuals and quick guides in there. I was actually just chatting with our tech writer yesterday about this very thing. We are taking a look at doing the more final documentation, getting that available as soon as possible. We're obviously working on that furiously. We'll have that all out before release. Hopefully more on that soon.
Excellent.
I'm going to just jump ahead here, Jason. Here's a fun one.
Yep.
I think I know the answer, but confirming, can't import an existing magic sheet plot into Augmented for a base start with all fixtures and truss already there. You actually can. you can use Magic Sheets to generate your augmented file and Augmented to generate your Magic Sheet file. Augmented to generate your Magic Sheet file is one of my favorite features in Augmented. We will cover that more in detail in some later classes, but that is a seriously cool feature.
Yeah, and to reiterate, to loop back to an earlier question about how you can build grids and circles in Augmented, that is one way of being able to do it.
That's true. Yeah, good point. Yeah, we have. I was actually just writing specifications yesterday about full, alignment, distribution, things all over. Jeff, right-click on the Augmented tab, and you'll find some things. Weston, if you get this out publicly before semester, you'll save our butts regarding teachers teaching in the fall.
You can always teach in beta.
Yep, you can always teach in beta. This is one of the reasons that I pushed to get us into open beta sooner rather than later, and the team was great about helping me with that. I will also just do a small shameless plug. If you are looking for some teaching resources, check out the Light Lab file that we posted. It's pretty cool. Had some fun features in that.
Yeah, we went through a little. If you haven't seen the session from 2 weeks ago, the prologue to this, we went through that a little bit in there.
Rob, one of the questions that came in, can you clarify the different colors on the axis when you're moving a fixture? Is the x-axis, is that red or green? And are the rotation arrows? Could you just go over that one more time? There seems to be some confusion about which color means which thing.
Sure. Yeah, red. So red is always X. So if you want to look at it properly, let me get my camera. I'll be offset a little so we can see them. So I'm almost looking at it straight on here. So red is X, green is Y, and it took me forever to remember which was which. And then Z is a little easier because it's going up. Z is blue, but that is indicated. I'm not able to resize my window here a little. Look here. So we'll get into all the editing tools in the future, but as a little preview here, our inspector here, these color codes match up with that. So these are the shortcuts that I was using earlier for X, for Y, for Z. You can also, I just realized this, was this on purposeful? So they're red, green, blue, so RGB in that order.
Oh yeah, we can absolutely take credit for these standards of UCP definitions that have been around for millennia. Absolutely, let's steal that. Yeah.
Sean just mentioned a great mnemonic to make it easy to remember: RGB XYZ, which is now how I'm going to remember it forever.
Totally.
Yeah.
I know. We just look at it.
That's a T-shirt right there. I love that.
Ellen White is already writing the jingle for it as we speak.
Exactly.
I had a question earlier from Felipe that was pretty good that I think we should touch on. Will it be safe to use Augmented as a blind preview mode so we can rectify stuff and work on notes while in rehearsal?
Let's jump back to, let me get out of our editor here. So we kind of looked at this briefly. Let's fix my ambient light. Are all my settings? Yeah, they're all, put those back there. So we looked at this briefly. So I'm going to go, let's use our bookmarks, into blind and look at our cues here. So you can definitely do that. So this is Q1. My keyboard is, there we go, Q2, Q3. So just like the screen, and again, I used this earlier, but so you no longer have to quote unquote read the matrix of looking at a live table or channel display to understand what's going on. So this could be a really easy way to go forward in your queue and say, oh wait, that was supposed to be a blackout. Why is that light on? Whereas if before this tool, the light that was on might have been on a different page in your blind display, you may not have caught it, or maybe one of these lights was stored in the wrong color or the wrong gobo or something. At a glance, you can easily see what's going on here. Does that answer that question, do we think?
Yeah, I think so. In terms of the safetiness of it, again, it depends on what it is you're trying to do. If you're doing like very distinct pan and tilt, it's only going to be as accurate as the model you put in. But in terms of large sort of changes, color changes, if something's wrong, like Rob was saying, it's absolutely safe to do that.
And we also have some tools that we'll cover, in future sessions, like stick beams and staging mode. That, and if your venue is accurate, you can use them for, we'll say, very close approximations for things like pan and tilt as well. It doesn't just have to be color or things like that. Now, color, I'll expand on that just a little. We kind of talked about it earlier. I would certainly trust your color palettes over what the color looks like on a screen. And Nick went into great detail about this on a color tools session a few weeks ago. But what you're looking at on the screen is almost never going to accurately, as accurately as lighting designers want, represent what's happening on your stage. So if you've written a palette that is, designer blue, and your designer loves that blue, you could certainly stick that palette in blind, see it represented in the augmented model, and know that when it comes up on stage, it's going to be the correct color if you're working in blind, working ahead or something like that. I would definitely not recommend trying to, take a little green out of that in the model, because it's just never going to be that accurate.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Is there a snaps feature instead of entering meters to place the objects? So I'm guessing that this means like onto pipes or things like that.
We've got a snap to the floor feature right now, but we definitely want to add some more of those and snap to different objects in the future, but not at release 1.
I have a couple of questions that have come in regards to placement. One is, and I'll ask them both because I think it's a single answer for the two. Is there a shortcut done and click command? And can you talk a little bit about how to touch on undo, or what to happen to move objects if you discover that a measurement has changed?
Yeah, we can talk about that. So I'm going to go back into our editor here. So currently, and probably for a while, if not forever, Lowell, jump in if you want to, there is not an undo feature in the editor. There is too much going on here to keep an extensive history of everything, every mouse click, every object moving. It's just too much information in different orders to do an undo in the way that we think of undo in the console software.
Yeah, this is following the same rules as what Magic Sheet is doing right now. So basically, when you're in the editor, it's contained inside here. We'd love to expand this out in the future, but right now we're using off of the same sort of tools and rules we've been using previously.
What I do have, and you might have saw it earlier if you saw what I did real quick, is we have when I exit the editor, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this wall, or I'm going to move our whole venue over here. When I click done, I have apply changes or revert changes. So if I hit the red trash can, it's not going to keep that, and my venue will be back where it was. So you do have kind of an undo back to before you went into your editing. So if you are working a lot in there, kind of a workaround for that would be every so often exit the editor, say save. If you're happy with it, go back into the editor. Which is very similar to the create restore points that we have in Magic Sheets right now.
So sorry, Rob. I just want to offer one little clarification there. So that's for the scenic stuff. Your fixture position, since it's actually handled through the patch window, that is all step-based undo, just like it would be if you had gone in there and manually done this.
Yep. Yeah, that's where I was going.
So just as a clarification, undo does work for some fixture applications, while it may not work for scenery applications.
It is for fixtures, not scenery, correct? Yep.
Okay.
And that is just where we are right now, and we'll be working on making that a little bit more flexible in the future.
Perfect. We've had a number of questions that have come in about that. I'm not seeing any other questions that have come in. Jason, is there anything that you've seen that we didn't answer yet?
Yeah, no, I've been going through some of the older questions and trying to find something, but I think we've covered pretty much everything we intended to cover in this class. Lots of stuff about if you ask questions about how to do things. We're going to be getting that into later classes. So those ones I look forward to the the future sessions.
Yeah, and I'm looking ahead in my kind of my workbook we're going off of here. So next time we'll start out by adding fixtures into our model, and then depending how far we get, there's a lot to do with fixtures. A lot of that happens in patch or the model, as Lowell just mentioned, and then depending how far we get, if we finish that quickly, we'll move on to the editor, which we've got a glance at today, but we'll really dive into all the tools of the editor after that. So that will be posted as soon as this class is over. I will work on creating that event, and we'll get a description up, and you can register for it, and that'll be in 2 weeks.
I was taking notes furiously as you mentioned that. Like,
okay.
Now I know
you can write the description. Perfect.
Yeah. Let's see, a couple of questions that have come in. David mentions he's been trying to find the augmented software but hasn't been successful. This is inside of our community server. It is a beta. You would need to join the beta team in order to get it. I'm going to go ahead and post a link for that right now so that you can find it. Date and time for the next session, 2 weeks from today, correct? So we would be looking at the 4th of June at 10 a.m. Central.
Yep, correct.
Yep.
And there will be another session next Thursday, a non-augmented related session. We've been doing an EOS session every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central U.S. time, and then which has always been followed and will continue to be followed by a HOG session 2 hours later at noon Central time on Thursday.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've been trying to reserve Thursdays for HOG and EOS sessions, so you can kind of keep this spot in your calendar reserved, and the ETC study hall pages or my ETC study hall will always show you what the current schedule is. We've also been trying to post the schedule on Mondays of every week so that you can look and see what's coming up for the week ahead. But as Rob had mentioned, yeah, for the next, you can assume that every other week we will be doing some form of an augmented session for a bit, but in those other weeks, Nick is absolutely running another set of EOS-related topics. Other question that came in: custom fixtures, like a practical on the set. Is there a way in this software to be able to put light inside of a piece of scenery?
Yeah, there is. I don't know if there's like a light bulb object, Lowell.
Yeah, there are a bunch of generics. There are a bunch of generics that we added. We don't have a way to turn a piece of scenery into a fixture yet, but it is on our list for something to do at a later release.
There's definitely some easy ways to do a representational object, which will for scenery and fixtures. So it may not be exactly, what your A lamp, your Edison A lamp looks like, for example, but you could certainly have an indicator in the model that it's on or off, or if it changes color.
Rob, are we starting from a new show file next week, or are we building upon this one?
I think I'm going to stay in this file just to.
But we are going to be adding trusses and some sort of objects, right? We're adding some scenic objects.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And there's nothing I've done in this file this week that is critical to moving forward. So maybe I'll look at it. But what I may do next week is just start from the beginning file again, just to keep it easy for folks who want to follow along.
That was a comment that had come in. Someone was saying it would be great if we could start with a blank show file build, placing reference points, truss objects, fixtures.
We may actually, for the things we'll do next week, it doesn't really matter. So maybe we will do a fresh show file. Again, there's nothing critical in here for for what we'll be doing next week. Like we won't be building off of this.
Rob, I think a fresh SOAP file would be a good idea. You could just start from scratch and go for.
All right, you ask, we answer. There you go. Another question Nicholas was asking, a discussion about a workbook. Do we plan on having the workbook for the beta group, or is that workbook intended for when we actually release the software?
So at release, we will definitely have a workbook along with accompanying videos with Nick Gunson and myself, put together by our incredible video team. So it looks like we know what we're doing. In the meantime, we have this series so that everyone is painfully aware that we have no idea what we're doing. We just make it all up as we go. So we will certainly have all of that at release. As far as the workbook for the beta group, that is something we've talked about. I know we haven't posted it in there as of yet. There is a quick start guide that has been in the beta group for a while. So there are some materials. I believe we do want to get what will become the final workbook in the beta group. We just have a few more things to do with it before we post it for everybody.
Anne's asking about the schedule. I'm going to go ahead and post a link for that right now. You can find this on ETC's study hall page. So if you go to etcconnect.com/study-hall ASPX ? Because why not? What you'll find there is a link to all of the sessions. You'll also find links to all of the archived events. And in addition to the study hall sessions that we're doing live like this, you can also find some of the other features that we're doing during the study hall session right now, which include featured videos, access to a video library, and a number of people, myself, I know, and Lowell included, have been doing Instagram office hours where we are available to answer any questions that you ask, even if they are Lord of the Rings related. Right, Lowell?
I don't want to talk about it.
That wasn't me. I didn't do it.
One of our web people decided to annotate one of my responses with some Lord of the Rings quotes.
It was kind of clever, I thought.
I am not a Lord of the Rings fan. I did not find it entertaining.
This is why you are nice to the IT department.
Cool.
Wow, that's a whole other thing. Yeah. I do see one last question in here that Jeff was trying to type in. I want to throw this out again, as I think it seems to be answered, but I may have missed the key of it. Does not moving everything before saving is the answer. If we move before changing.
Yeah, I got that, David.
Okay, all right.
If you are leaving edit mode and you discard your changes, it will discard all changes from your session.
But only the session you just opened. It's not since the last save. So I just want to make that because he asked the question later on about save.
From when you last entered edit mode. So once I leave edit mode and click the green check mark, those are kind of locked in. And then once I go into edit mode again, if anything I change in there, when I leave, I can keep or discard.
So functionally, as you're doing things, if you exit and then edit back, hop back, it's kind of like doing a little quick save sort of thing. So you can always have kind of a quasi-undo points at certain areas.
Anything else, David or Jason?
Unless we want to start a big Lord of the Rings thread, probably not.
Between Lowell and myself, you have some of the most unqualified.
Yeah, that is what the internet is for. That might not necessarily be what this webinar is for. Just as a reminder to those of you that are still with us, the session has been recorded. We will be posting the recorded version of this session up into our YouTube study hall channel, where you can find recordings of all of the sessions that we've been doing over the last couple of months. And as this series grows, we'll continue to post those sessions as well. You can go to the forums for any additional feedback as you're discovering it with the beta, or for support. That forum is monitored by a group of people that are actively looking at comments and suggestions and thoughts. And I want to thank our panelists today, Lowell and Rob and Jason, and anybody else that I may have missed in this session, for joining us today and working through this. I also apologize, gentlemen, for my tardiness in getting this session up and running. With that, if there isn't anything else that anybody wants to add, thank you all for your time today.